The first speaker is actually our kind host here at Cooper-Hewitt. He's a director. He actually made the first laptop in the world, which is quite interesting. I mean, a lot of us have laptops nowadays. And he also came out with an interesting book, Designing Media. So please welcome Bill Moggridge.
Well, thanks a lot. Expanding contexts. That's really what I think about design beyond design. And in order to design in this more complex, expanded way, I think we need help from stories, teams, and crowds. So I think of the expanding context in three sort of concentric circles, where there's the stuff that's personal, that you have your own as an individual. Then there's the social environment that we live in, the built environment, and then the larger scale of the planet that we live on. This is actually pretty well covered by the triennial show that we had last year at the museum. This is the website for it. And it asked the question, why design now? And I think that described some of these expanding contexts very effectively. And you can see there the themes with energy, mobility, community, materials, prosperity, etc., as the way of selecting the items which were brought in from all over the world and interesting. Also had a lovely and very sustainable catalogue designed by Michael Beirut from Pentagram. And it was the greenest catalogue we've done. Even the shrink wrap was biodegradable. So when I think about this personal level, the thing that's just an individual, I think the context can expand from products, we used to think of things, towards a more holistic view of the individual, health and well-being. So as an industrial designer, of course, I was always thinking, oh yes, I was going to be designing things all my life. For example, a little digital passport here, a hard drive that you can pop in your pocket. Nice design for an object. That's not going to go away. Designers are still going to need to do those things. But it's not holistic. You think of it as an individual thing. But if you think more about health and well-being, I think one of the examples from the triennial show is interesting. This is the adaptive eye care solution. So this is a pair of glasses that have a frame. So there's a sheet of mylar front and back attached to that frame. And you see those cylinders on the side. They have a gel inside. And so you can put this on your face. You wind the little wheel until the lens expands the mylar until you can see. So you just go like shut one eye, wind until you can see. Maybe gone too far, wind back a bit. When you can see, that's it. And then do the same the other side. Then you can take off the cylinders and you have a self-prescribed pair of glasses. Now that's great if you think about it in a more overall health and well-being sort of way, because you don't have to have places where you go and have eye studies. You don't have to have specialist oculists and a distribution system. So you can get a self-prescribed solution to at least far sight and long sight, although it doesn't deal with aberrations. So I think that is an example of expanding that context. When we think more of the places that we live, the traditional architectural approach has been buildings. I design a building. But perhaps we can expand that context to include social innovation. I like this example from the exhibition of the Mapungubwe National Park Interpretive Center, which is a beautiful building in a national park in South Africa. They don't have any steel there, and they don't have much in the way of trees left because they burnt them all. But they do have great clay for making bricks. So what you can do is make an armature and then build a brick structure that, because of its shape, is very robust in the same sort of way that you built cathedrals in Europe in the earlier centuries. And so you can achieve a result, which is a beautiful building made from the materials that are available. You can recycle that wood for the armature, and you end up with a very nice looking interior, which is like a crypt in one of those cathedrals. That's the shot of that. But if we think about moving forward to social innovation, then we need to have a process which allows us to think in this more holistic, expanded way about how to design for social innovation. And this human-centered design process guide is aimed at the places where we don't have such sophisticated design education, and the NGOs and so on working in India and Africa and so on. It was funded by the Gates Foundation and developed by IDEO. It's available as a free PDF, which you can download, and it has pretty good examples as well as the description of process. So it allows people to think about how to design for social innovation in a more holistic way. Here's some examples of some of the things they did. Tatiana there was learning to plow, but she couldn't really get the confidence of her hosts without staying overnight first. But having stayed overnight and hung out with them, they allowed her to drive the plow in the morning. Here we have an example of seeing what happens when you really don't have enough water and you have to deliver it. And here you have some local folks in India doing their own brainstorm and coming up with a social innovation solution. They seem to be enjoying it. And I think if you look at the expanded scale of the planet itself, the sustainability issues that we face, we used to think of products and designing materials as the main solution for sustainability, but perhaps we need a more holistic view of that as well. One of the things in the exhibition I really liked was this mycelium-based insulation material. It has the same insulative properties as expanded polystyrene, both in terms of heat insulation and fire retardants. But you grow it out of mushrooms, basically. And the mushrooms feed on grains, and then you kill the mushrooms when it's the right size and use it for your insulation. It's a company called Greensulet. One of the people that I love in terms of giving us a big picture of sustainability in a broader context is Shinichi Takamura. He's a professor in Japan who used to be an anthropologist, so he would study peoples. And he got a little fed up with just looking at the way people behave, thought it'd be interesting to try and change their behavior. So he became a media producer, and he created this tangible Earth globe. The globe is like a hemisphere with touch sensors around the base, and it has a computer projection of the world inside, real time for weather, has all the information from scientific sources about global warming, etc. And here's a little description of how it works.
Okay, let me introduce our tangible Earth. It's the world's first interactive digital globe. It's interactive in the sense that you can spin it to any direction like this. You can rotate the borderline between daylight and shade. It's real time, so you can tell in which area the people are greeting sunrise, and on the other side of the planet, around Minnesota, people are enjoying the sunset. The size of this globe, 1.28 meters in diameter, it's one of the important aspects of the information design. This scale is about 10 million to 1. For example, troposphere, the layer of the air surrounding the planet, is only 1 millimeter.
So that's just a little bit about how that works. Here's an example of it being installed for the G8 summit in Hokkaido, so the leaders of the world could see this. If you look at my website for my book, you can find a free download of the whole video where he describes all the different things like global warming, ocean currents, and so on. And a great predictor, in fact, of the disaster in Japan, because he shows the way the plates come together, and that the worst ones, the 4 plates coming together right off the coast of Japan, he said it was inevitable that the nuclear power plants would suffer from a tsunami soon. Was he proved right? Now at last the Japanese government has recognized his forecasting and asked him to sit on a national committee to try and prevent such things in the future. So those are my 3 very short, quick versions of the possibility of expanding design or thinking of design in a greater context. But now let me ask the question, well, how can we get better at designing in these more sophisticated and complicated ways? And I think Stories teams, well, I'll try and answer that question with some examples. So the first thing is stories. I mean, I think most of the design disciplines, we're used to using a method for prototyping which suits the particular discipline, a building or a product or something. But if you put everything together in this more holistic way, you really need to prototype in a way that hangs all these elements together. And storytelling is the right way to achieve that. So putting together videos, being pair, in fact, would be great for everybody. Everybody should be pair. Or you can do After Effects, or you can even do really simple things, just like acting out. Your first sketch can be an enactment rather than a full story. Just like your first sketch is on the envelope, let it be a little play acting to start off. I was interested in Ira Glass because I think This American Life is a very magical program. It's the best storytelling on radio. And I always think that radio has very powerful storytelling because your visual imagination is enhanced. So I went to interview him for my book as well. You can find that on the website too. And I thought you might like to hear a little bit about what he said.
From cutting tape and from listening to other people's work, I came to feel like you don't want to structure a story like an argument. You want to structure it with this structure that I thought really that I invented. But then came to find out, no, it's actually quite common. And what the structure is that there would be narrative motion. Things would happen. This would happen, it would lead to this, and it would lead to this, and it would lead to this. And then, and so you have the forward momentum of things happening. And then every now and then you leave the action to say something about it, to have some thought about it. So the structure of it is anecdote, and then a moment of reflection, then another anecdote. And like when I give seminars to reporters, I play this story that was on our show where the plot of it is that there's a guy who works at this office, and there's a 12-year-old who comes to the office. Somebody's kid comes to the office every now and then. And she's a good kid. They would joke around. He would clown around with her. And one day he goes into the bathroom, and comes out of the bathroom with glasses in his pocket. And he sees the little kid down the hall, so he starts kind of clowning around in the hall, putting his hands like claws and wandering down the hall towards the girl, saying like, I didn't expect to see you here. And I say, when I'm talking to reporters, like, okay, at that point, like, nobody turns off the radio, Nobody turns off the radio, but if you think about it, it's an incredibly banal story. Like there's a story about somebody coming out of a bathroom in their office. Like, there's nothing to it as narrative, Like, it has none of the stage props of a great story. But you'd be hard-pressed to turn it off from the radio because you can feel that it has emotion. You could tell that this is a story with a destination. You could tell that the glasses in the pocket are the X factor that mean that when he gets down to the end of the hall, it is not going to all work out for him the way he's, you can just feel through the motion of this that it's a train in a station heading out towards a destination.
Now, Ira has those kind of laws of narrative, well described, action and reflection, but of course it's rising action, and he has the art of doing that to create the color and suspense and to give the little reflective points. I also think teams are a very important attribute for succeeding in this more design beyond designed way, because it's very difficult for any of us as individual designers or individual anybody's to solve these complicated holistic problems without our head hurting too much. So the idea of putting together people like designers who start from the people side and the business people and the technology people, having them work together and giving them a process which allows them to abstract ideas, come up with new frameworks, create alternatives, etc. All part of the well-understood design process, but implemented by teams that include non-designers, or in fact are mostly non-designers. So there's a generally iterative process, but a single example would bounce around like the little green line in the center there. And I think of the iceberg analogy as being about the way the human brain is so much more subconscious than it is conscious. And it's only like the little bit of ice that sticks above the water that's the equivalent of the conscious mind, which is what most academic teaching is about, and that we as designers understand how to harness the intuition and use the subconscious, that vast amount of ice below the water. And then there's crowds, and I think, we can harness the power of crowds, and crowdsourcing has been proved to be a wonderful asset. So I interviewed Jimmy Wales. I think Wikipedia is one of the more surprising forms of crowdsourcing success. Who would have thought that Encyclopedia Britannica would be out of business and Wikipedia would be the source that everybody uses. Here is a little bit of what he said.
The idea of a wiki, of a website that anyone can edit, was actually invented in 1995 by a guy named Ward Cunningham. And from 95 until 2001, when I launched Wikipedia, wikis were this small underground phenomenon on the web. And in fact, a lot of the wikis that were out there, they deliberately did things like hide themselves from the search engines, because the concern that they had was if anybody came to the wiki who was a malicious character, they would just destroy it. For example, they only kept 2 or 3 old revisions, which meant that if you're a vandal, you could come in and edit the page 3 times with curse words, and the old good version would be gone forever. So in the early days when I first set up Wikipedia, I really thought, you know, well, I mean, this is really we're gonna have to lock everything down very quickly. But because the traditional project that I had before to create a free encyclopedia had failed, I really had this desire to say, okay, look, I know what went wrong the first time. It was top down, it was controlled, it was difficult for people to get involved. Now we have this other approach. I'm gonna say, stay as open as we can for as long as we possibly can. Let's just try this. Very quickly, I changed the software to keep all of the old versions because I realized like that eliminates a major vulnerability. So the analogy that I like to give people, sort of a thought exercise, is to imagine that you've been assigned the task of designing a restaurant. So you're going to design a restaurant completely from scratch, blank sheet of paper. You have no preconceptions about what you're going to do. Free reign, it's an artistic project, you can do whatever you want. And so you think to yourself, okay, well, in this restaurant, we're going to be serving steak. And whenever you're serving steak, the customers need to have access to knives. And if there's one thing we know about people with knives is that they might stab each other. And so in the design of the restaurant, let's put everybody in a cage. We're going to have a cage around every table. Well, we all chuckle when we hear this idea and we think, gosh, that would be a really bad society.
So interestingly, you know, one of the things about Wikipedia is that there is a lot of expertise used to control the quality. And you have these volunteer authors, of course, the crowd themselves. The admins are also volunteers, and then they elect other more senior admins who are also volunteered, and they appoint a board, which is Jimmy Wales, King Jimbo, he calls himself, appoints his board like a monarchy, and that's why he calls himself King Jimbo. So there is a lot of control built into the design of Wikipedia. It's not just the crowd, it's the crowd plus the experts. And interestingly, IDEO has a rather similar thing with OpenIDEO, which was started a bit recently. So they have a series of challenges, and in this case it's like a health challenge. The design team takes the information from the crowd and works on the inspirations provided by the crowd, and then comes up with concepts and then puts it back out to the crowd in order to see what the evaluation might be like and do another iteration. So I think this combination of crowdsourcing and expertise is a very interesting opportunity for operating in these more complex environments of design beyond design. So thank you.
Very interesting. Before we let Bill go down and sit again, are there any questions? Anybody? It's always very quiet when you say that, any question. It becomes very quiet. So
I was very grateful, actually, because, you know, that David here said I should have only 15 minutes. And then I was looking at my clock, it said 15 minutes, he gave me another 3 minutes. So I've already overrun. Maybe we don't have time for questions.
Right, yeah. There's one question over here, so I'll take this microphone and then walk down 2 seconds.
Oh, yeah, you have to have the mic so that the people
so otherwise we won't hear
watching
you.
online can hear.
This is a short question, which probably takes a long answer, but in terms of thinking about the designer's role, and particularly teamwork, what implications does that have for education? I mean, I ask this question as an educator, in as much as, you know, we have students working in teams, but the extent to which students have got to still follow a particular discipline or, you know, fields, I'm thinking particularly of undergraduates, but then one also is aware that when they're going to hopefully be designers, they're going to be working in ways which are very different. So could you just give us a couple of words on that?
Yeah, I don't think the teamwork that you get within a single discipline is all that useful. The teamwork that really works in the context I've been talking about is interdisciplinary. So it's really understanding how to collaborate with people from different backgrounds. I would always suggest that individual skills should be developed at undergraduate level in a very specialist way. That you want people to be really good at doing whatever they want to do before you think about trying to worry about collaboration. And then at master's level, you could say, well, why don't we see what people want to do? So some people want to go on being specialists, and so they become the great chair designer or the great architect or something. But others are interested in these sorts of complicated interdisciplinary teams, and that's where they need a program that helps them learn how to collaborate across disciplines. The D School is a very good example of that. The Aalto University in Helsinki is much earlier, been doing it for 15 years, and they've been doing it across the technical, business, and design disciplines. I've taught in the D School, and the thing that's really lovely about it is when you get these students from different backgrounds coming together on a project, they do this collaboration thing, and then they break because they need to develop ideas, and each one of them wants to do the thing they want to do. So there's only one person who wants to do the business plan, there's only one person who wants to develop the technology, there's only one person who wants to do the design. Whereas if you have all the same background of students, they all compete in order to try and do the same thing. So I think the idea of making it really genuinely interdisciplinary at an educational level as well as a practitioner level is very useful and important.